let's take you backwards from Galwan. Let's take you to Doklam. Describe your days in Beijing those days.
Well, I haven't ever spoken about it because, but
There's always a first time.
yeah, but I'll speak of it in general terms because I don't think it's appropriate to for me particularly
As much
having been
as
in that.
as much as you would
Yeah,
as a
so
diplomat.
basically, from 2013 onwards, there was a shift in the way in which the Chinese behaved, not only with us, but with all the neighbors. Uh, Deng Xiaoping's basic foreign
Can I
policy.
interrupt you for a
Yeah.
second? 2013 is the watershed year because that's when Xi Jinping takes over.
So Deng Xiaoping's basic foreign policy and national security strategy was a 24 character a strategy which is simplified as hide and bide, which is hide your capabilities and bide your time. His view was that until China became strong militarily and economically, there was no point in raising one's head and demonstrating one's sense of importance or leadership. By 2013, when President Xi Jinping came to power, the circumstances, according to him, had changed. Economically, after the global financial crisis, China felt that they had held up the world when the West was in crisis, and therefore, economically, they were a peer to the West. Militarily, they were much stronger, and diplomatically, their influence was great. And so he changed this hide and bide strategy to a strategy which was called striving for achievement. I mean, it's a bit of an obscure term in English, that what it essentially meant was China would move from a reactive foreign and national security policy to a proactive national security and foreign policy. And so what you see is a more assertive, and if you ask many people in India or among the other neighborhood, they will say aggressive foreign policy, where China begins to say that any action which is against my interest will be countered with a severe repercussion. So long before Doklam, we see this first in 2013 in a place called Depsang in Ladakh. Then in 2014 in a place called Chumar, and that happened when Xi Jinping was actually in India on his first visit, and our Prime Minister had just assumed office a few months before. And Doklam is then subsequently an incident that happens in succession to that, and then Galwan. Now, what you see is actually an expansion of this whole approach of putting pressure on you. So Depsang is a very tiny point, and the dispute goes on for a matter of a couple of days. Then Chumar in 2014 went for a couple of weeks. Doklam went for a couple of months. And then Galwan went for 4 years. For 4 years, it was unresolved. So what you see is a prolongation of the pressure, a widening of the tactic to keep you under pressure. The fact that you then do it at multiple points at the same time. And all this, in fact, suggests that the Chinese strategy is to basically keep you pinned down and to keep you confined to South Asia. Now, of course, we might ask ourselves why that is the case, because I think militarily, economically, and diplomatically, the gap is still very, very great. And the only reason I can think of, and this is a personal view, I don't know whether many people share it, but I think that India poses for China an ideological threat. At the end of the day, we are a country which elects its own leaders every 5 years and which has a democratic society where you can express your opinion. For China, which is a single party state, which has told its people that you don't need democracy in order to progress, it becomes difficult to explain, I think, to its people after a certain point of time how another neighbor, which is as big, as diverse, as complex, is able to or is allowed to elect its people. So I think they see Indian democracy in a sense as a longer term ideological problem. And I think their idea of diminishing India in some way, embarrassing us, embarrassing the government, humiliating the people, is in some way an attempt to ensure that Indian democracy never poses a challenge. Of course, now I also notice some kind of a mindset change happening in that for the first time, I think if you see Chinese writings in the last 3 or 4 years, that absolute certainty that they would outpace India year after year after year to infinity is going. they now think that the gap is not going to grow very much more. It may not reduce unless you grow at 9 or 10% per annum. But that linear growth that we saw between 2000 and 2020 is over. So to that extent, then it means the window begins to close where India is able to more and more compete with China over a medium to long term. And that's also changing the mindset. So I think a few changes are happening in China. It's not immediately evident to the Aam Janta. But I think we have to keep an eye on these trends because they will lead to some adjustment in Chinese policy towards us.